And as we've been telling you, Vice President Kamala Harris has officially kicked off her first foreign trip since becoming vice president, landing in Guatemala on Sunday. And during this two-day trip, she will hold meetings in Guatemala's capital before flying to Mexico City this evening. She's under intense political pressure to stem the flow of migrants coming into the United States. And joining me now to discuss this further is attorney Steve Maggi, former immigrant and naturalized U.S. citizen. Steve, welcome back to BNC.
A pleasure to be with you always.
Glad to have you. Let's talk about Guatemala. It is her first stop on her trip. Why did they pick that country?
Well, Guatemala is one of these three countries that creates or generates a lot of the migrants who end up in Mexico, going through very difficult conditions to get to the U.S. border in order to apply for asylum or to enter illegally. And so it made sense for her to start there. Guatemala obviously borders on Mexico, and the expectation is that maybe Guatemala takes more responsibility by closing its outside borders or its borders with Mexico, not letting people out so easily, or cooperating more with Mexico itself. So it makes sense that she's there. But I have to say, this recording that you just played for the viewers, it's a very hardline approach. It's very shocking to hear our new vice president say, we will not let you into the U.S. Like this Dr. Hernandez said from Los Angeles, the kids and the families who deserve to apply for asylum who are on the border, they're being told now maybe the message is that you can't come. And then what happens to those tens of thousands of people who have already made their way to that border?
Yeah, actually, listening to it, I did hear her actually say at one time, don't come. Very strong words. We're not used to hearing such strong words when it comes to the Democratic Party on this issue. But we know that the Biden administration did strike a deal with Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras to increase border security in an effort to stop migrants from reaching the U.S. But what actually needs to be done then to help slow the influx of migrants, but then also treat them fairly?
That's a great question. It's hard to do both of them at the same time. I think it's a very paternalistic viewpoint that I really am shocked to hear from this administration, because when President Biden came into office on January 20th, he talked at length about making this once again the place for foreign nationals who have humanitarian problems, who come from places that are, have extreme poverty and natural disasters and things like remedies like temporary protected status that allow those individuals to have a chance to make a life in the U.S. And now we're hearing the opposite message, which almost sounds like the Trump administration, which is, we're not going to let you in. And that's not how it works. That's not how due process works. If somebody is physically in the United States, they're due process rights under the 14th Amendment. So it's a combination of saying we're taking a step back and we're giving a hard line as if we were the Trump administration going backwards, and at the same time being paternalistic and very naive. I don't think they're being completely forthright with the public, saying that these are problems that need to be addressed in those countries, and we want to give you some of the solutions or provide funding or sign these agreements. And it's not acknowledging the fact that these issues have existed for decades in those countries. There's a lot of corruption on a government level too. So you're just lining the pockets potentially of these political leaders in these three countries that have always had these same issues. Nothing is new here. There's been drug trafficking, human trafficking, natural disasters, extreme poverty in these countries for many, many years. And now the way that the Vice President Harris speaks, it's almost as if this were some new problem and we have a potential solution. And in the last clip that you sent, when she was speaking live, she said, I want to hear from the Guatemalan people what you think. Well, nobody was listening to them for the last 30 years. And now suddenly we're extrapolating or we're externalizing these problems that are ours, meaning how do we actually treat immigrants when they want to immigrate to the U.S. or they want to apply for asylum? Are we going to do it in a humane way, or are we going to treat them like the Trump administration was treating them?
But is it that she was saying that she wants it, in essence, done in a legal way, in a safe way, and by telling them not to come, it's because there is so much talk about how dangerous it is. We see the children making these dangerous journeys. We know how incredibly unsafe it can be. Is it, you don't see any difference in the way they're handling it compared to the Trump administration, in that they are saying, yes, we understand there's an issue, we understand we're trying to improve it, we want you to be safe, and we don't want you to take those chances, and we want you to come here legally? Do you not see any improvement or difference in the messaging than you saw from the Trump administration?
Well, I think the messaging is one thing, and then what actually is carried out is another. And I think that you have to communicate a message that anyone who qualifies for asylum under the laws that we currently have should be allowed to apply for it. And if that means, and it does mean, you have to be at a border crossing or enter the U.S. physically in order to apply for asylum, you can do it at the border crossings, or you have to be physically in the U.S. So somebody who is in Guatemala cannot apply for asylum in the U.S. because they're in Guatemala. And so you can't have it both ways. If you're saying that our borders are open to those people who deserve protections, like we've always tried to do, then you can't tell them, don't come if you're not next door in Mexico or near the border, or you're not going to be at risk to come. Because the bordering countries are not going to give them asylum. And so that's why they eventually come to the U.S. and apply for it.
But is that not the actual problem that they have constantly said? As you said, it's a 30-year problem. They can't take everybody in the United States. And so there are some Americans, both regular citizens and those in different administrations, who say we have to balance it out between what we can handle in America as opposed to just having open borders. We obviously don't have that, but people who on the other side of the aisle saying we don't have open borders, we want to help people, but at some point we have to have structure and process and limitations. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's contradicted by the fact that some of these same countries where these migrants are coming from are able to get temporary protected status if they're in the United States. Meaning, if you're from El Salvador as of 30 years ago and all this time since, if you come into the U.S. illegally, you can apply for temporary protected status and get it, which allows you to be protected from deportation and be able to work. So on the one hand, we're saying it's okay depending on what country you're from, but if the circumstances to get you here are not favorable, we don't want you to come. It's a way of essentially trying to limit the amount of people who are going to make that attempt. But the question really is, what is our stance on asylum? What is our stance on refugees? What is our stance on helping people that need it? If you come from Haiti on a raft, like happened, in the 1990s a lot through Miami, this issue was not coming up. They weren't saying, we really regret that things in Haiti are so difficult and we're not going to let you in, right? But now it's almost like they're picking and choosing what's favorable or what's not, because honestly, I think the message is they don't want anyone to be coming to the U.S. and applying. And that's when she said, don't come. I don't think she was saying it because she's really concerned about the conditions and the humanitarian part. It sounds more like the U.S. just does not want more people to come to the U.S. And we have to either have it one way or the other. Either we are open to helping people who meet the requirements for asylum, or we're not.
Interesting perspective. Of course, we're not hearing from Vice President Kamala Harris that they don't want immigrants, but I understand the point that you're making. We're out of time, though, but thank you so much, Steve, for joining us and talking to us about this issue.
Thank you.